we have come to the last panel of auto assembly. About 365 days ago. Got all the way. Right, okay, I'm just going to hurry this up. Welcome to the last panel of TF Nation 2016. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, we want to make sure that we end this show in style, so we thought there was no better way than talking about the thing that everybody is talking about every single month. However, ladies and gentlemen, it is really hard for my old brain to be able to keep things straight, so I'm going to hand over the hosting duties of this panel to a very good friend of mine. He is absolutely essential reading for More Than Meets the Eye. He is the guy that writes those lovely wiki articles. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Chris McFeely. So let's bring on our guests. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, put your hands together, stand up in fact, for Mr. James Roberts and Mr. Alex Milne.
Fashionably late.
I hand it over to you. Thank you, Dave.
Right, no one's here to listen to me talk. So, we'll get straight into it. Look, I've got notes and everything, that's how hard I'm working at this. So, season 2, we've just wrapped it up, and big changes on the horizon. We were about halfway through season 2 around this time last year, and I think for the first question we should go back to the very start of season 2, because if the finale that we've had, that was just finished up, The Dying of the Lights wrapped up, it's proved that Megatron was really at the core of season 2. But Megatron was never supposed to be in season 2 whenever he wrote out the original myth arc for More Than Meets the Eye. So tell us, what was the genesis of season 2 and how things changed after Dark Cybertree and leveled the playing field?
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know what season 2 would have been about if Megatron hadn't cropped up. And I do plan ahead, but the Megatron thing happened so early into More Than Meets the Eye. It happened within the first year. Issue 9 was coming out, and decisions were made, and Dark Cybertron was mapped out, and it was decided that one of the repercussions would be Megatron switching sides. And so I was a long way off the end of season 1 when I knew that Megatron was going to be on his way, and so my plans for season 2, when I really got down to it, always included him. There were certain elements and sort of plot threads, such as I knew there'd be a time travel story, but until I knew Megatron was going to be part of the mix, it wasn't all going to be pivoting around his creation. I knew it was going to involve Brainstorm, and I knew it was going to involve sort of unrequited love, but I didn't know Megatron was at the heart of it. So that was going to be part of season 2 all the time. And Rodimus finding himself in a coffin was always going to be part of that too. The duplicate lost light. So there were some features that were there anyway, and I found a way to make, as far as possible, to make them about Megatron. But as you say, season 2 is Megatron's redemption arc, and I can say redemption arc now because we've got to the end of it, and you know where he ends up at the very end of season 2, and he is still an Autobot. I mean, he's they're all dead. You know, that's a minor problem. But they've overcome worse before. So you know, yeah. So Megatron is.
Wait a minute. Is that James? Is that James Roberts? It's James! James, it's Sentinel! James, Mr. Roberts, it's Sentinel! Hey, write me, would you? Write me! James? Hello? Oh, he's not listening to me. That filthy organic. Add him to the list.
Wow, it's like a really persistent cosplayer.
That's an odd coincidence, because you have just written Sentinel Prime.
Yes.
A bit of a jump to the end of season 2, but Titan's Return is happening. I've been thrown completely out of order with that.
Okay, yeah. So we're on issue 56 has just come out. The penultimate issue of More Than Meets the Eye in its current incarnation. And I would encourage you to think of it like that. Think of it as regenerating. It's the same characters and same story. We'll come to that, I guess, at the end of this chat. But it's carrying on in a different disguise. But right now, yeah, Titan's Return, two-parter, relatively self-contained compared to Dark Cybertron. And yeah, so Sentinel Prime's come back. That was good, because we've delved into that era before through the More Than Meets the Eye stories, and there was obviously a connection to Megatron. So it's a crossover story, but it's got a More Than Meets the Eye feel to it. And next issue, 57, so the last issue of More Than Meets the Eye, the challenge there was to make it a crossover issue, to bring the Titan's Return storyline to a conclusion, but also to make it a sort of a fundamentally More Than Meets the Eye feeling issue, as befits the fact that it's the last one. So you'll tell me if it works or not, but there was quite a few boxes to tick in that one.
Alex, I always say, and I've said it to you, that your art is as intrinsic to the identity of More Than Meets the Eye as James's words are. And season 2 has afforded you a lot of opportunities to design more brand new characters with no previous incarnations. Freud, Terminus, Nautical was yours, I believe?
No, that was James Reyes, but he designed her for Dark Cybertron. But I refined the design a bit more to fit in more with More Than Meets the Eye.
And of course the DJD were all yours, and
my little hell babies.
So I know it's maybe like asking you to choose between your children, but are there any of the new characters you've designed for More Than Meets the Eye or season 2 in particular that you rank above the others? Like some of you, which ones are your finest works or your favorite characters?
For all of More Than Meets the Eye, or for just season 2?
Well,
season 2?
There are different answers. Please provide both.
Okay. Well, the designs I like the most overall for More Than Meets the Eye, probably Skids and the DJD. For season 2, Firestar and the female Transformers that showed up in 41 and 42.
Yeah, I like Firestar a lot as well. That's as far as I got. I think people probably have
all improv from here.
I think people probably have a lot of questions for you guys anyway. Yeah, there are questions out there. But before I hand it over to the audience for questions, I've got one or two of my own. And it's a big part of season 2, a big part of the finale. I want to talk about Tarn and who was under that mask.
Who's under that mask?
Sinister applause.
Who's always been under that mask?
Yes. No.
Choose your words carefully.
We have snipers ready.
So, a lot of people thought it was Roller. But what I've always wondered is, it always seemed to me that people latched onto the idea that it was Roller before the comic ever provided any suggestion it was ever Roller. But then suddenly, about a year ago, there was an issue that came out that was 20 solid pages of ridiculously overt hints that it was Roller.
You're talking about issue 36.
That's
Yeah.
right, I am. And my question is, was the idea that it was and we reached the end of the series, obviously, and spoilers for anybody who hasn't got there yet, but we found out that it wasn't Roller, but you did pull the double bluff at the very end and teased everybody with the ha-ha, it's not Roller moment. Was it always intended for Roller to be a red herring, or did you only put that in whenever everyone made up the idea that Tarn was Roller?
I have a feeling I'm going to be answering this question for the rest of my convention career. And I don't know what will convince people to believe me when I say, no, it was the idea. Okay, right, so here's the full story. When we created Tarn was never about who's behind the mask. We wanted a character with a Decepticon symbol for a face. And that was to be a mask. So the core of Tarn's identity was never intended to be, who is it really behind the mask? That was secondary for me, at least. And it was more, Tarn was Tarn. And through the pages of More Than DCI, we learnt about this, this Decepticon zealot who held Megatron above all else, and the Decepticon philosophy above everything else, and acted accordingly. That was the character. But a mask was involved, so inevitably speculation abounds about who is behind the mask, who's wearing the mask. Alongside that, we'd introduced Roller as a person and not a part of Optimus Prime, and we'd established that Roller had gone missing. It was unaccounted for. Now, when we established that, I didn't have a huge multi-year plan in mind that Roller will one day end up disguised as an organic inside, a hollow planet presided over by some mythical space, whatever. I didn't have that in mind. I just knew that sometimes it's useful just to have story hooks and to have things put to one side that you might choose to use later on. That was as season 1 was moving along. When we mapped out season 2, Roller was never intended to be Tarn. It's quite possible that even that early on, people were speculating that Roller was Tarn. Fine. Certainly, by the time I came to write Elegant Chaos, issue 56, I knew that there was a healthy sort of Roller is Tarn speculation industry. And so issue 36 was where we showed you how Roller disappeared. We did give him an injury that mirrors the scar that Tarn has, and that was a very, in hindsight, very blatant misdirection. But I can only stress that the idea then was still that Glitch was going to be Tarn. And there is a panel in 36 where Pax is saying to Roller, I'm paraphrasing, but you really should check out Megatron's writing, it's really good. And Glitch is in the background, Glitch is within earshot. And so now that's the sort of best on-panel defense I can give, that it wasn't the case that we sat down, talked about Dying with the Light, and I thought, let's just switch that around at the last minute.
Well, I also think it was really interesting how you started to change his powers over the course of when we first see him. Like, when Glitch is first introduced, he has the claw hands, and he can only physically touch and affect sentient, mechanical stuff. The next time we see him, he has regular hands now, and he can do it from a distance. He can he doesn't just break them down, he can rip tanks apart with his power here. So just showing the progression of his power over a short period of time, he had 2 appearances, but over the course of however many years it was. And then finally, when that started happening, you told me who Tarn was, which was before 36. I was just that's really cool, because his outlier powers were developing to the point where he got them so precise that he could use his voice to disrupt machinery.
It's funny, Alex, that you mentioned that. When did you discover who was under the mask? When did James actually tell you who Tarn was?
I think that was during like I was just bothering. I was like, who's Tarn? Like who? I'm like who are you gonna make Tarn? I'm like I hope it's not a roller because like I'm really upset that people are just like basing it off of a design, like a similarity in the head shape. And I'm like, when there's like a lot of other people that have also similar head shapes. So I was like, who's it gonna be? And he's like, it's gonna be Glitch. And I was like, and then I was like, you know what? That's kind of cool because like outlier powers developing. So I think it was around it was after Shadowplay, probably around Remain in Life.
So there was no deliberate similarities in the design, because obviously that was a lot of people latched onto the idea that they're both big. So
yeah,
that was
they're both big, but
that was proof. That was everybody was convinced. That was
both big,
concrete evidence the roller was Tarn. They're both big.
They're big, and they have circular parts on the side of their head, and the head shape is the same, and like they have big shoulders that obviously transform the same way. But Senator Shockwave has a similar head shape with circular parts on the side of the head. There's a lot of characters that have circular parts on the side of the head. That's probably just because of my fancy for drawing circular parts on the side of the head there. But if you're going by size comparison, like overall, Tarn is about the height of Optimus Prime. Roller is the height of Ultra Magnus. He's huge. He towers over Megatron. So like there's like a big difference there.
That's the extent of, that's the precision that you work to, you know, like scale references and things we've all never seen, I'm sure, hidden away in your sketchbooks to make sure everything is kept consistent across the board.
I try to. You're always going to like make a mistake somewhere, and like the more I've worked on More Than Meets the Eye, the more I've like tried to do different ranges in scale. Like when it first started out, like in the very beginning, like season 1, like the first issue, like the majority of people were like around the same height, but then I started to like vary the heights. But like Ultra Magnus has always been a lot taller, but now I've made him much taller than like Rodimus. And then like when Megatron came in, I was like, okay, Ultra Magnus, Megatron, then Rodimus. Like Cyclones would be between those two. So it's just been a progression over the years.
I feel like Rewind and the other small bots have gotten smaller and smaller over the years. Maybe it's just everyone else is getting bigger around them.
It sounds dirty to say, but I like to keep like most of the mini bots now at crotch height.
Next question, please.
Well, we all know height difference is very important in a good ship, James.
Next question, please.
That wasn't my doing.
I think we'll turn it over to the audience now for questions. Yeah, everybody, good to see some hands. Who's got a question over here? Do I have to run down or do we have a runner? No, there we go. Let's go at the front, yeah.
What's always supposed to be Roland?
You've already answered that. Well, that was going to be my question, but you've answered that one, so alright. In season 3, are we going to see Gears and Thunderclash and the rest of the crew of the Lost Light get their comeuppance for what they've done to Rodimus and Megatron?
Right, I'll just run through a list of all the things that are going to happen in season 3. I thought you were going to say, in season 3, are we going to return to the Lost Light and see Getaway's captaincy and see the other mutineers? And I would have said yes. So yes, we are going to inevitably return, because it's already been a long time since, it's been over 6 months since you last saw Getaway. You've had one scene containing the other characters, or some of the other characters that betrayed the captain, and so we're long overdue a return. In terms of comeuppance, well, life's pretty complicated, so you'll need to see how things pan out in season 3. We're gonna take a few curved roads perhaps before we get straight to a certain point.
Next, anyone? Just check this back here. We'll go this guy's
Hi there. Well, back in the season 1's finale, in the Remain in Light, you'd said previously that there were a lot of changes, like originally Tailgate was going to die and there was a lot of characters' fates that did hang by threads. I wanted to ask about this season's finale, if there were changes that happened, or say for instance, any characters who were going to die who escaped somehow, or people that weren't going to die who vice versa swapped their fates.
Yeah, I've got an answer for you. I don't want you to think this is all, you know, there's sort of a flip of the coin to it. So, you know, Tailgate survived because I had other ideas about where we could take the character. Originally, and I don't know whether this wasn't me sitting down to write part 3 of Dying of a Light and thinking I'll just change around, but at some point in the mapping out of season 2, then Brainstorm was going to die at the end of Dying of the Light, as well as Skids. He's the other main casualty, so he's dodged the bullet for a while anyway. I don't think anybody else. The DJD were always going to be there. Nickel was always going to survive. Yeah, I think it was really Brainstorm slipped the noose.
Stand up. Okay, sorry. When we go away, we see like the other characters, like the Scavengers or Fortress Maximus and Red Alert. Those are great individual stories. Is there any chance of like a mini-series on any of those?
Yeah.
The question was if there was any chance of a mini-series for the supporting characters like the Scavengers or Fortress Maximus and Red Alert.
Probably not, to be honest. And it's more a case of is there a chance. I mean, we've now got 3 ongoing. There'll be 3 ongoing titles from December. And in the past, when there's been just 2, there's tended to be a third run of comics, which is, you know, a succession of miniseries like Sins of the Ruckus and so on. And there's a feeling that sort of three Transformers comics a month is pretty much what the market can sustain.
It's Rosam's Trinity.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, we've tried to shine the spotlight on, you know, if you like, more than meets the eye supporting cast or peripheral cast, and we'll see quite a lot more of that in season 3. I'd like to. You know, we're 5 years. Alex and I are 5 years into this now, and I think we've built up through the way they look and the way they act quite a rich supporting cast. And we'd like to move the spotlight around a bit, and I think that's where you'll see sort of perhaps more of a structural change to how we tell stories in season 3. We'll have some vignettes focusing on groups or individuals.
Next, it's Jack Painter. We're going to beat the
like you've got the monster box on the Lost Light. Did you always want to have them? How did you get them on?
We got them on because I wanted them on. And I asked James, I was like, can we please have the monster box? And he was gracious enough to be like, yes, we can.
We had an opportunity at the beginning of season 2 to refresh the crew, and we should do more with them, really, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, just before we go on to the next one, that's a good question. It's like, in addition to the monster box, there were some, you know, there's the core cast of More Than Meets the Eye, but there's only about 200 dots on the ship altogether, and it's always the same. It's never random. It's always the same character. Like personally, I want to see more of Huffer in Years.
Wait, is there still 200, like after Dark Cybertron, or did more join?
Yeah, we've kept it a bit vague, haven't we, on purpose? But I mean, it's in the hundreds, yeah.
But are there other characters that you fought to include, or are there other characters in the supporting cast that you, like, in the back of your mind, one day there'll be the subdecks issue where you'll explore what they go get up to while the main cast is doing their thing?
Yeah, I mean, where we find ourselves now with the storyline is that there has been this sort of natural split, or an unnatural split, where we've got, you know, all of your heroes, apart from being dead, are well away from the Lost Light. So, you know, when we went to go back to your question, when we return to the Lost Light, you know, there will inevitably be a focus on what some people would say, you know, the B and C listers. It's more Than Meets the Eye has always been an ensemble comic, but it's got a very big main cast. I think there's about 17 characters, forgetting the DJD, but 17 Autobots and Megatron and Ravage, you know, in the Fortress.
There's 19.
So, you know, that's a lot to juggle, and I well understand why people, you know, if you know your favourites on board and you want them to get some love, we could do that. It would be at the expense of everybody else for a month or 2 months, you know, and you want to do these stories justice as well. And we could have and we may well have a below the decks issue, which, you know, looks at insert your characters here. But it would have to be good, and it would have to have a beginning and a middle and an end, because then you might not see those characters again for a year. So we are aware of who else we've got to play with, and like I say, when we revisit Getaway, some other characters will have greater prominence than in the past.
And are there any other characters that you've fought to include or specifically requested to include, either of you?
What about you, Alex? Have you got everyone you want on board?
No, like, characters that I want on board, they're stolen by other people, so, like, I would have loved to have gotten RC on board, because I like her. I remember when we were talking about what Decepticons would be part of, like, Death Saurus' crew and that, you're like, what other guys would have back there? And I said, like, Blackout and Lugnut. So, and we got to have them in there, except I never got around to drawing Blackout there. I got his design sitting around, but I'm like looking at for the panel count, and I was like, I forgot to draw him in here, and it's like, oh, well, he might show up again later. Like that crew, most of that crew survived. Like,
yeah, it did.
Like 40% of that crew, or 60% of that crew survived. 40% toast by a fusion cannon.
It's sort of a case of Bagsy characters. So, you know, we've established that certain people are in Death Saurus' crew, so, you know, we know we've got them. But, I mean, no, I haven't. I'm happy. I've pretty much got everybody. I mean, I've even got Prowl at the moment for a couple of months. But, you know, when Season 2 started, we got Ravage. Don't know what happened to him in the end, but we got Ravage. We got genuine unhappiness in the audience there. And Blue Streak, and, you know, the old favourites.
Any more? So this going first.
Talking of characters that may or may not be on the table, slight spoilers that Springer has just been seen in Into the Records. If he survived in that, could he potentially find his way out? If he survived, of course. But I know that'll be a quick...
Nick's distracted at the moment. Is Nick radar switched on there? Springer's the green one, yeah?
I think so. But that would be a nice to know if maybe.
Oh, okay. So
more than that, I was more interested in Nickel. You said she's survived, she's dodged bullets. Given that Tarn was a Megatron zealot, what's Nickel's background? Is she a Tarn zealot, and is she going to be a bit miffed that he's been a thing?
Nickel isn't a Tarn zealot. Nickel was disappointed in Tarn. Nickel saw Tarn for what he was in the end, and it wasn't what she thought he was. So she, being a level-headed pragmatist, and probably a better Decepticon than Tarn was, she cut her losses, gathered up the others, and she's retreated to the War World, where she's in charge. And, you know, really the only insight we've had to date into what motivates Nickel is the fate of the colony that was attacked, you know, by organics. So that's going to inform where she goes next. As for the Wreckers, what's left of the Wreckers, you know, the gap between Last Stand and Sins, as Nick, I'm sure, has said, there was always, you know, vague plans for there to be another story. And while those plans were vague, it was sort of a gentleman's agreement that, you know, I wouldn't touch those characters. They sort of been in a holding pattern to be used eventually. So now they've been used, you know, they may well crop up in season 3, some of them. Well, they may not.
Next. Right, that. Multiplying. This one here. This one over here.
How many more ways can you recursively homage that JLI tunnel?
Until every last drop of humour's been wrung from me.
I think we got a memo saying that we can't do it anymore.
From the Justice League themselves.
Next.
It's like one of those things that ceases to be funny, so you keep doing it, and then eventually it becomes funny again, or not.
I wonder if you can pull the veil back on the decision to name the new series or the rebirth series The Lost Light. If that came from John Barber or the new editor saying, James, what would you call it? Or did you get told this is what we're going to do?
Yeah, okay. I've been told we'll get into the details shortly. But quickly, the answer is no. I didn't come up with a name. It was a sort of an attempt to refresh all the titles, and we'll talk about it a bit more. But I wouldn't have minded at all if we kept the old title. Although I do prefer The Lost Light as a title for a comic. So.
All the other characters of the DJD, are you going to name Chaos too?
I am. I'm trying to think of a way to do it.
Right here, right now.
As an exclusive. If only I could think of the worst name for you all. I prefer to do it. We've never seen it, have we? Have we?
We can name them Lines.
Ideally, we do it in the pages of the comic, because any other way really it doesn't get out there necessarily to everybody. But I feel like the health warning is, you know, it's not going to blow your minds. I can't think of a name where everyone's going to go, my God, that was worth the wait. Similarities to the tar reveal there.
Well, that was sort of the point of the scene when Megatron strips them of their aliases and reveals that nobody's underneath. You know, you've never heard of them. That's the point. Because, like, not to bounce back to the time question before, but were you saying that people sort of made more of the quote-unquote mystery of Tarn than there ever actually was?
Yeah, but that's not their fault. I mean, you can see why. I mean, it was a 2.5-year story arc. The DJD were the big bads of that storyline. As I've said, the main character had a mask. You know, it is inevitable that in the 2.5 years, people are going to talk and speculate, and it's going to become a bigger thing than I would have liked. But I'm to blame too, because I played on it, and I gave you a hint of what was behind the mask in issue 39. I gave you some misdirection. So, you know, I contributed to that. But at the end of the day, and not to keep going back to the Tarn thing, but
you will keep going back
for the rest of my life. But it was either going to be Roller or Glitch or someone you really hadn't ever heard of before. So, you know, and I didn't say this before, but you know, I didn't want to kill 2 characters with that scene. I didn't want Roller and Tarn to go. There's life in Roller yet, and he's, you know, if he wasn't dead, again, caveat, then it's amazing how many people are so blasé about the planet exploding. But you know, I wonder why that is. But yeah, Roller, were he alive, I'm sure would have lots of adventures and potential in him.
Next. Over here, Tailgate.
Have you ever written or drawn anything and then like either weeks, months or years later looked back at it and gone, oh, I really regret it?
Yes.
I can see it now.
It's true. I'm regretting the decision right now for this line. It's a horrible line.
Yeah, me too. Every month, sadly. But I mean, that's just that's how it is. I find it very difficult to go back and reread stuff because you only see, well, two reasons. Guaranteed you'll see the things which you could have done better, and lines you only thought about when you're reading it in the comic shop. But also because it goes through so many iterations. It's like when you've chewed all the flavour out of that piece of gum by the time it's finished. There are some exceptions to that, and rare and precious is the issue that I can go back to and think, I am generally, happy with how that turned out. It's never an artistic, never down to the art. In fact, the art is what elevates it. But from a purely writing perspective, I tend to see missed opportunities, things that didn't quite hang well, and so on, and that's what you fixate on.
For me, it's usually like I'm happy with the work, and then 3 months later I look at it and I'm like, I could have done that better or that better, or this, I don't work this way anymore. And like I look back at the very beginning of More Than Meets the Eye and the way I draw the book now, and that's like totally different. But I think that's natural for an artist because you're always learning how to do new things, and you're constantly growing and evolving and changing your style to like fit the mood, or you want to try different things. So I'm never going to be completely happy with looking back at the work that I've done, because it's not how I work now. It's like I had a different way of thinking about approaching the page, and like now that I look at it and be like, I want to redo that to the standards that I have now. But there will be like a few things that I'm like, that was really good. Like I pulled that off there, and like I'm quite pleased. Like I'm like, how did I do that back then? Because I could do that now, but back then I'm like, maybe I wasn't as skilled as I am now, and yet I did pull it off. So I'm like, wow, that was like some sort of miraculous miracle that happened there, where the planets aligned and just gave me godlike drawing powers to get that down on the page in time.
It's funny actually, because the idea of being dissatisfied with your past work factors into one of the big, but more subtle overarching themes of More Than Meets the Eye's second season.
This man is good.
Which is to say edits, and but obviously the closest you can get to it is fixing it for the trade. But when you read or reread the finished issue, or when you look at the art in the finished issue, in your head, you the little edits like Megatron and Ron to talk about at the very beginning of the season. As a writer and artist, how does that inform that theme in the series?
I mean, it was how to describe it? I mean, it was an overt theme in season 2. We were pretty on the nose with it in issue 28 in the first episode, in the Rogue Megatron discussion, and what appealed, I've cautioned against it actually in conversations this weekend. It's never generally a good thing to decide on your theme and then write to fit the theme. It's much better if the themes emerge organically. The edit was a safe exception, I think, because, and why it appealed is because it could be interpreted as, on different levels. It meant, literally, if you like, editing the past in terms of changing history, removing people from history. But it also applied, to character development as well. And as I think, as Ron points out, how you selectively re-edit your experiences so you can live with yourself and change who you are. So yeah, I think it was satisfying because it allowed for, I think, a pretty. It was strong enough to carry 28 issues, I think, and take us through to the end.
Well, I've been told we only have 5 minutes left, so I think for those final 5 minutes, we should talk about Lost Light and the change to the book and what we can expect in the future.
Right, so I'd ask all of you to spread the word that the More Than Meets the Eye is just mutating into something else, okay? So it is the same storyline, it's the same huge multi-year quest with a beginning, middle and an end. We've passed the midpoint, I think it's fair to say. But The Lost Light is a continuation, that's why I'm deliberately and persistently referring to it as Season 3. It's just got a different title. You've seen the cover, or one of the covers, so you know that in some way or other, 4 people that you're familiar with are in the mix. As for the type of stories we're going to tell in season 3, well, clearly the big unresolved issue is, you know, the lost light. Where is it? What's Getaway up to? How do various people react to the betrayal? Again, the Necrobots planet. There's been, you know, there's been the explosion. There's been obviously the death of everybody. How are they going to get around that one? But season 3, really, you're going to see some longer form stories. You know, we start off with a multi-part story. We haven't done that before, so we generally have sort of the big 5-6 part season finales. But we're going to kick off with a very big story as well. You are going to see more of the stories relate to the quest, and you're going to detect sort of progress in certain ways. I've said before, we're going to revisit certain characters. We're going to make the most. It's almost like, you know, I won't say it's a final lap, but, you know, we're sort of we've put the time in, and we've got some characters we'd like to see again. So we've got Nickel and Dead Saurus. We've got Getaway and the Mutineers and the Lost Light. We've got Red Alert. We've got Fortress Maximus. Scavengers, and there are others. And so, you know, we'll be paying visits to people as well. I don't know really if there's much more I can say than that, really, but it's got a very set direction. As in the past, I know where it's going, and actually I'm writing with the very end point in mind. Now, it doesn't mean season 3 and we're done. It might mean that season 3, season 4 and we're done, or it could just mean that we phase out the season structure altogether and just have a nice run of stories taking us to the finale. It seems odd to be talking about the finale when we're just launching issue 1, so don't read between the lines and think, oh, 12 issue maxi series, we're done. It's pushing ahead. There's no defined endpoint other than I know that the stories that I need to tell to wrap everything up.
Alex is going to be joined on art by Jack Lawrence, of course. He's not here, but Jack is sometime in the future. Jack worked with you in the Transmasters in the past.
Yeah, so Jack and I know each other from the 90s, but we haven't collaborated in all that time. And Jack did a cover, I think, to Sins of the Wreckers. He's on one of the covers to Lost Light issue 1, and he's great. So he'll be doing some issues. As Chris said, though, I mean, more than meets the eye, and as we've said in this interview, it's sort of it's a James and Alex baby, and you know, we don't want to mess with the DNA of More Than Meets the Eye, even if it's called The Lost Light. So you know, it's going to be the old gang telling new stories.
I think that's what everyone wants to hear. I think that is that us. Yep, that's all right. Everybody give a big round of applause for James and Alex.